if we value the folks around the table as full human beings, if we appreciate their full humanity beyond the title, there's so much richness that we could leverage in our problem solving. The respect for culture that could be intertwined in those constituents that we're claiming to design for, that can make its way into the problem solving, and we're better for it.
One core strength that good designers cultivate is the ability to navigate ambiguity. Our guest today, Kevin Bethune, returns to the show to discuss his new book, Nonlinear, which emphasizes that to achieve real innovation, teams must be willing to venture into the proverbial forest of ambiguity.
We talked to Kevin about how we can bring nonlinear thinking into our very linear workflows to shake them up and embrace ambiguity and exploration. Kevin also shared why he thinks multidisciplinary thinking is essential to innovation and creativity.
This is Design Better, where we explore creativity at the intersection of design and technology. I'm Eli Woolery.
And I'm Aaron Walter. You can get ad-free episodes, discounts on our workshops, access to documentaries like Design Disruptors, and our growing library of books, as well as our monthly AMAs with big names in design and tech by becoming a Design Better premium subscriber. It's also the best way to support the show. Visit designbetterpodcast.com/subscribe to learn more. And if you're hiring or looking for your next design role, visit designbetter.directory, our new site that helps talented designers and great companies find each other. Hi there, Aaron Walter here. If you're hearing this, you're not currently on our premium subscriber feed. Design Better premium subscribers enjoy weekly episodes, 4 episodes per month in total, rather than 2. All ad-free, and invitations to our monthly AMAs with the smartest folks in design and tech. You'll hear a preview of this episode, but if you'd like to hear the full conversation, please consider becoming a premium subscriber at designbetterpodcast.com/subscribe. It's just $7 a month, and it supports not only your personal growth, it also makes our work at Design Better possible. The podcast is available to everyone through our scholarship program. If you can't afford a subscription, email us at subscriptions@thecuriositydepartment.com, and we'll help you out. And now, back to the show.
Kevin Bethune, welcome back to the Design Better podcast.
Oh, thank you, Aaron and Eli. Thank you for having me back.
We are very excited to have you. And in the interim, since recording your first episode, I was lucky enough to have you up in person at campus to our class. And then we hung out in San Francisco, which is a lot of fun. But I was not aware at the time that you had this project brewing in the background, which is another book. And Aaron and I are curious, given that there is some not insubstantial pain involved in writing a book, as Aaron and I both know, what brought about this idea of doing it again?
Yeah, the thought of writing another book, I feel a little dead inside. But I think definitely having the privilege and the support of the MIT Press, after Reimagining Design came out and having a litany of conversations with some tremendous audiences and at schools, at companies, there was something more to say. And not to say that the idea of a second book was going to be a sequel to Reimagining Design, but there was another opportunity to create a narrative around a set of thoughts and convictions that I thought were important for this conversation around where design fits into multidisciplinary opportunities. And the MIT Press saw fit that the second book, Nonlinear, Navigating Design with Curiosity and Conviction, could also fit within the Simplicity series that the MIT Press has supported under the editorial direction of Dr. John Maida. So this will be, I believe, the 11th book in the series. It's not a sequel, but it's just another set of arguments that I felt were still necessary to convey after the first book.
So folks who missed your previous episode on Design Better, which we will link to in show notes, would not know that you've had a very multidisciplinary background, that you worked in a nuclear engineering capacity, you worked with Nike designing Jordans, and you've just had like a very widely varied career, which is unique. How much of that informed or was the impetus of this book, Nonlinear?
Very much the foundation. As you said, I definitely had some very unique zigs and zags, as I call it, in the journey. And I never would have predicted it playing out that way, honestly. But hindsight being 2020, I can say that curiosity was a defining thread. And I had the privilege of finding myself in some situations that were arguably early in comparison to maybe what my peers were going through, whether it was a previous life as an engineer, a business person, and then understanding how design could fit into my puzzle moving forward. I did find myself in situations where I had to connect the dots between disciplines, sometimes when I had permission to do so, and sometimes when I didn't, and ruffled a few feathers in the process of just connecting the dots and running experiments to see what could happen from that. And so I think those experiences definitely help me today in terms of the times that we're in, where multidisciplinary convergence, I believe, is the requirement, not the exception like it used to be.
So talk a little bit more about that, because I think from Aaron and my perspective, we're certainly seeing that multidisciplinary thinking play out in the fact that roles like designer and developer are starting to blur together with these access to these generative AI tools, where me as a designer, I can code little prototypes, or a developer can very quickly create some kind of initial UI design. So that's certainly part of it, but maybe talk us through your thinking on why these things are converging and why it's becoming very important to become multidisciplinary.
I think the benefit of digital is that it's definitely brought us together. It's shrunk the world down. It's like ever shrinking. The connectivity is just at a whole nother level, where a lot of the complexities of today, thanks to digital, thanks to the rise of generative AI, a lot of the complexities, I believe, require an elevated sense of importance to creative problem solving and critical thinking, because you could argue that information is readily accessible, data is readily accessible in many ways, but to be able to pull together people around the table to make sense of what's happening, to parse, what is credible information from potentially misinformation, disinformation, and to be able to surface patterns of importance of what we can pursue as an opportunity to create something new and of value to whoever it is we claim to be serving. That's why I believe the complexity of our times, and especially the way the future is unfolding, is going to require us to sort of lean in together and almost, I hate to say, disintermediate some of the preconceived sort of titles that we've given ourselves, the preconceived sort of silos of discipline that has to blur too.
Can you ground that a little bit for us? Maybe give us some examples of some of the problems that are unfolding right now in the times that we live, where multidisciplinary thinking is kind of the only solution.
I definitely look at the application of generative AI. I mean, I am no expert. I think we're all in our early infancy experimenting. It was nice to see Eli up in Palo Alto show a couple of prototypes he was working on. So I think it's necessary that we lean in and experiment on some of these tool sets to see where is there value. Can these algorithms, for example, LLMs, take away some of the routine and help us automate some of those tasks? But again, we need to interrogate, like, how can we actually show up for the constituents that we claim to be designing for and designing with in new and novel ways that are beyond just the present patterns of marketers marketing and consumers consuming things. If anything, generative AI and the like, algorithms like it, can speed things up to a level that's going to further exacerbate a lot of the problems that we're encountering today. Sustainability, data ethics, privacy, all these compounding intended as well as unintended consequences will just further exacerbate. And then I'm also drawn to some of the thought leadership of the likes of Monica Bilskite and others like her, where they're strong reminders that there are people living in dystopia right now that are vulnerable to some of these ill effects. And all the more reason to bring sort of the human quotient, the technical quotient, and the business quotient together around the table more than ever before.
I don't know about you, but I've definitely worked with multidisciplinary people like Eli, and they tend to be the people who come up with the best ideas, are the most capable, are the most resilient when they're thrown really challenging problems. I'm talking about, working on software with people who have a background in not just software development, but biology, or they've got a background in industrial design. Like, I have a background in painting, for goodness sakes. Like, that's very different. And I find, like, personally, either working with someone who's multidisciplinary or the way that I've approached my own growth journey, the more I learn about adjacent things, the better I am prepared to answer problems. I wonder if you can share any examples of people you've worked with who embodied that multidisciplinary thinking and how that affected the workflow?
It's funny, in Nonlinear, I shine a light on a client partner that I've been working with for the past well over 6 years. It's a biotech venture based in Irvine, California called Envoy. INVOY is how you spell it, Envoy. Led by an incredible leader in Lubna Ahmad. She's a PhD in respiratory chemistry, so she was a scientist. She was a scientist that had to learn to become a CEO, had to learn how to take her research and package it in a way that could be piloted, and that she could find benefactors that would want to potentially help in the fundraising to raise funds to actually manage this as a company. So she became this science business hybrid, science slash, Silicon Valley's founder sort of persona. And we met at a serendipitous time when she wanted to bring out her intellectual property out of stealth and begin to align this as a product that could be, sold into companies. And so when we met, she had an open mind because of her background, having to wrestle with different muscles herself. Design was now this new entity put in front of her upon our meeting. And she was open to just sort of experiment with me. And we tried some things together. We worked the whiteboard together. How would this unique intellectual property that she had around breath biomarkers and understanding what's happening in the human body, how could we take the existing traction that they've achieved and begin to humanize how we show up for different constituents that this platform could serve? How could we iterate and come up with the most coherent, relevant solutioning that matched the value criteria of all those different stakeholders in her sort of path, in her trajectory for this business? And we challenged our own sort of assumptions in that journey. We went on listening tours and talked to some of the existing members that were a part of the early pilots and got a lot of latent substance that we can then shape to make our solution even more relevant, more impactful, and figure out the best ways to show up. And so it's been a beautiful relationship. It wasn't, something that started with a design sprint and ended. We've been working together in a creative problem-solving capacity over the last 6+ years.
Let's talk a bit about the title of your new book, Nonlinear, and maybe just walk us through what nonlinear thinking is. How might it be different from thinking in business terms or in engineering terms or design terms?
Even with the rise of things like design thinking, human-centered methods and approaches, the business world at large, when introduced to a new methodology, there tends to be a tendency to take the risk out of any approach. Like once it kind of works over here, I want to replicate that and ask all the teams to sort of follow that same approach. And so the de-risking leads us to sort of formulaic practices that you can't necessarily tweak or break later in time when it is appropriate to do so. So nonlinear, in a way, especially with design being the youngest to the party in terms of the creative problem solving at the table, I wanted to shine a light on design's nuances. That design is so much more than the sprint framework, or if you follow these 6 steps, you get innovation automatically. We know that design is much richer and more nuanced than that. So how can we shine a light on these nuances and complexities as a source of nonlinear advantage to have people understand, armed with new perspectives, how can we help them understand the litany of choices that they can have as they enter a forest of ambiguity and be able to make a decision based on the best information they have at their disposal, to take a step and experiment, to learn more, to get more evidence, to get more inspiration, to get more insights and data points, to then navigate to the next step of effort. Ideally, for the sake of learning our way, prototyping our way to the more relevant solution versus just any solution.
I think there's a notion of that linearity of innovation that I don't have research to back this up. This is only a hunch, but it's connected to industrialization, that as we start to automate and produce things, we should follow this line. But when we think about, famous examples like Archimedes trying to figure out the volume of gold in a crown for the king, figures it out in a very nonlinear way. Tries to do a lot of math, a lot of formulas, can't figure it out, takes a bath, water displacement, aha, eureka, I've got this idea. And that's kind of the way that the brain works a lot of times. It's like when we confront these intractable problems, we kind of have to let it stew a bit. I'm curious how that factors into nonlinearity, that reflection process.
I would sort of translate what you just described as sense making. It is not a linear act to sense make. No matter the opportunity that's been put in front of me, especially as of late running my own practice, no matter what the brief is, I always try to exercise an MO of opening the aperture with my client partners and the teams that I work with and am a part of. And the MO there is like, how can we make sure we're surfacing as much diverse ingredients that reflect the context of the stakeholders we're designing for, but really the world that they're operating in, the journey that they're on, not necessarily what us trying to sell a product or a service. It's like what context is surrounding that set of people in this ecology. And let's understand all the different inspirations, the data points, the business drivers, the hard constraints, but also like what are some of the analogous inspirations we can pull in that are outside the realm of what we're focused on in the moment, because there could be some patterns. I honestly believe that you got to get the team immersed in that diversity of ingredients that maybe that initial brief isn't even asking for. But if you put all that substance around a team or give them the autonomy and empowerment to go get it and bring it into the room together, then you're allowing a natural environment where sparks and connections can naturally occur. You got to give people a little bit of freedom, a little bit of space, the right ammunition around them to be able to make those sparks and connections. And that's creativity.
In your book, you talk about diversity as a flywheel and an accelerant. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, how that works in innovation.
I think as we discussed, the world is a lot smaller. The complexities of our times require us to sort of lean into each other. Even like notions of our lived experiences. I mean, Aaron, you mentioned painting. Some of those adjacent things that we're involved in do color how we see the world. If we value the folks around the table as full human beings, if we appreciate their full humanity beyond the title, there's so much richness that we could leverage in our problem solving. If we ensure that the teams that we're empowering or evolving, we're growing and shaping, actually reflect and mirror the beautiful mosaic that is the world and all of the intersectionality that make us up as human beings, those adjacencies, those relationships that we already have, the respect for culture that could be intertwined in those constituents that we're claiming to design for, that can make its way into the problem solving. And we're better for it. We're more astute. We're more respectful. We're more able to pick up on the nuances that could lead to unintended or intended consequences as it affects people. Right now we're feeling that in terms of algorithms not being able to pick up on the needs or the specific realities of certain groups of people. Like there are people already vulnerable to some of those disconnects today, and we see that already. So the faster the world gets, the tighter that we are intertwined together, the more diversity and design become interlinked, I believe.
You mentioned earlier on that your book is part of this series that was started, the Simplicity series by John Maeda. And when John was on the show in a prior episode, he's been on a few times, he talked to us about the idea of genius design as like one methodology for designing. And genius design is basically like, it's sort of like what we think of as Steve Jobs, like I came up with this idea and I made it. Another example is, I know that is not true. That's not the way that Apple has worked, but that's the perception. 37 signals for a long time. They make Basecamp. Now they're called Basecamp, I believe. They sort of had this idea of we're designing for ourself. Even Ralph Lauren has said, I am the client. And to some degree, like sometimes that can work, but what you're talking about is, these diverse perspectives. Problems are not always so tidy. What's your view of this idea of genius design and where does it fall short, if at all?
I guess I do view it as a two-sided coin. I do agree that...
If you'd like to continue listening to this conversation, you'll need to subscribe at designbetterpodcast.com/subscribe. Once you do, you'll get access to every full-length episode, all ad-free, monthly AMAs with inspiring people in design and tech, and recordings of all our past AMAs. The podcast is available to everyone through our scholarship program. If you can't afford a subscription, just email us at subscriptions@thecuriositydepartment.com and we'll help you out. Your support makes Design Better possible. Invest in yourself and the design community by subscribing at designbetterpodcast.com. Design Better is sponsored by Thuma. I'm the sort of person who can't help but get lost in the details of creating a beautiful space. I believe that a well-designed home is a sanctuary for creative thinking, and our friends over at Thuma think the same way. Thuma creates modern furniture with timeless design.
Their beds, their nightstands, dressers, and shelving are all built with the perfect balance of form, craftsmanship, and functionality. Using Japanese joinery techniques, each piece is crafted from solid wood and precision cut for a silent, stable foundation. I've just ordered their classic bed and headboard, and I can't wait to integrate it into my house. Assembly takes just 5-ish minutes with no tools at all required, just one hand-tightened screw. That's it. That's all that holds the bed together. It's kind of amazing. They're made to last a lifetime with a warranty to match. With clean lines, subtle curves, and minimalist style, the Thuma bed collection is available in 4 signature finishes to match any design aesthetic. You can even upgrade and customize your bed's headboard. It's pretty great. To get $100 towards your first bed purchase, go to thuma.co/designbetter. That's thuma.co/designbetter to get $100 off your bed purchase. thuma.co/designbetter for $100 off. Design Better is supported by Masterclass. At the start of each year, I always reflect on my life and set some concrete goals for myself. This year, one of my goals is to rethink my personal style. So I jumped into Tan France's masterclass on this topic. You may know Tan as the fashion expert on Queer Eye. Well, I learned a ton about creating a flexible capsule wardrobe, and I gotta say, I am dressing pretty sharp these days. Plus, I've been learning about business, architecture, playing music, and so much more on Masterclass. I'm in there all the time. Masterclass is the only streaming platform where you can learn from over 200 of the world's best and brightest. People like David Sedaris, Ryan Holiday, Anna Wintour, Shonda Rhimes, Martin Scorsese, and Jane Goodall, to name just a few. I learned a lot about business strategy from Bob Iger's Masterclass, and Eli is a huge fan of Neil Gaiman's Masterclass on storytelling. Where in the world can you learn from this many brilliant people? With a Masterclass subscription, you get access to all these people and many more who cover a vast array of topics that will help you professionally and personally. You can access Masterclass on your phone, computer, smart TV, or even in audio mode. My wife and I often sit down together and watch a Masterclass. Right now, Design Better listeners get an additional 15% off any annual membership at masterclass.com/designbetter. That's 15% off Masterclass. Masterclass.com/designbetter. Masterclass.com/designbetter for 15% off.